and I am just super excited and super honored to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Nadia. She's just an amazing human and does so much for the community and is such an inspiration to all of us. Can we just give her a big round of applause? Nadia, she is the founder and CEO of the Story Graph, which is the main alternative to Goodreads, and she is crushing it right now. She's just crushing it. It's amazing. She was showing us her new user registrations, and that graph just, sorry, I'm riffing off your bio, by the way, sorry. But yeah, it's just incredible to see. The Story Graph, it helps people discover what they want to read based on their mood and topics or themes that they're interested in. She's a one-woman dev team, which is absolutely incredible, and she built her platform using Ruby on Rails. It serves millions of users worldwide, and she didn't just start writing code. She actually got her degree in philosophy, politics, and economics, overachiever. At Oxford University. So she was actually going to be an investment banker, but then she decided to learn code. She did a boot camp in London, which is awesome, and decided to be an engineer. She worked at Pivotal Labs, and then she started her entrepreneur journey. She also really enjoys dancing. If you haven't seen her dance or any of her dance videos, you should follow her on Instagram because she's an amazing dancer. Really into fitness and, of course, reading. She always has a book. And as a testament to her broad range of skills and interests, she'll be presenting something a little different from your usual keynote. So we're in for a treat. So get ready for a fun and unique talk on all things Ruby. Welcome, Nadia.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be the closing keynote of RubyConf this year. Thank you so much to Kinsey and all of the organizers for having me do this. So as you just heard, my name is Nadia Odunayo, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called The Story Graph, a reading tracker and book recommendations app. We help you to choose your next book based on your mood and your favorite topics and themes. We've got a whole range of stats where you can learn about your reading habits and see how they develop over time. We've got machine learning powered personalized recommendations. It's like a trusted go-to friend who knows your preferences, but whose brain is also a book encyclopedia. You can find your next perfect read by filtering lists of books by mood, pace, fiction and nonfiction, genre, book size, and more. You can also read alongside friends, adding live reactions to specific parts of the book. And the comments remain locked until your friends reach that specific part in their reading. And there's a whole lot more on offer. We have 10 million unique monthly visitors who generate 17 million page views per month. And each day, we serve 11 million requests. So that's around 330 million requests a month. Now, not only are we profitable, we are 100% bootstrapped. We've taken no outside investment. Thank you. So people often ask me, what is Story Graph built in? And I love that I can say Ruby on Rails. Thanks. Now, with all of the website and app activity, we get a lot of customer feedback, feature requests, and bug reports. And given that I run the company's Instagram, Threads, and Twitter accounts, I'll often receive messages that include something like, if you could pass this on to your dev team, that would be great. Now, while I have an absolutely awesome co-founder in Rob Freelo, the web and app dev team is made up of just me. In fact, I was the opening keynote at RailsConf in Detroit earlier this year, and my talk was titled, Getting to 2 Million Users as a One-Woman Dev Team. When I first gave a version of this talk back in October 2022 at the inaugural RailSAS conference in LA, the talk was titled Getting to 1 Million Users as a One-Woman Dev Team. And if I were to give this talk today, as of a few days ago, I'd have to update the title to be Getting to 3 Million Users as a One-Woman Dev Team. Oh, wow. Oh, thank you. So when I was putting together this talk, we were at around 2.9 million registered users, and I did the math, and I figured that we would get to 3 million like today or yesterday. So I've been keeping tabs on the user numbers to know whether I would take this out or not. But we went viral on TikTok the other day. So now we're like 70,000 users past 3 million. So it was just quite funny. Thanks. Oh, y'all really like the intro. I hope you like the meat of the talk. So as you can imagine, I've got a lot of work to do, and it can be stressful at times. But I keep the stress at bay by making time for myself and my hobbies wherever I can. I read, of course. As Kinsey said, I dance. I lift weights at the gym. And I hang out with my friends and family. So this is my siblings and I on a trip in Mexico earlier this year. And I'm the oldest, though I don't look it. So yeah, all of those things keep me mentally healthy and at peace. I've been running Storygraph for 6 years now, and people often wonder why I haven't burnt out yet. And I reckon it's because I make time for all of those things. But I have a secret. Don't tell anybody. Some of you may already know what I'm about to say, but you can't tell anybody else. You see, I've got this secret side gig that's been taking time away from Storygraph work, sometimes stressing me out, and definitely increasing my risk of burnout. You see, I'm not just the founder, CEO, and sole developer of the Storygraph. I am also a private investigator. And what is it I investigate, you wonder? Yes, you guessed it. Ruby crimes. No, not jewel theft. I investigate crimes and mysteries relating to our favorite programming language. I've been doing this also for about 6 years now. And what got me into it in the first place? Well, there'd been rumors circulating of a shady mastermind causing havoc and confusion amongst Ruby developers worldwide with his constant meddling in the source code. And I wanted to be the one to put a stop to him. Oh, and I'm sure all of us here know just how lucrative the world of Ruby private investigating is. I decided that I couldn't do this side gig under my normal name. No, I needed to protect my identity. So I decided to call my Ruby private investigating alter ego Deirdre Bug. D for short. Why? Well, isn't it rather obvious? Now, I've got several stories from my years of doing this work. In fact, I've shared them at previous events. Maybe you've seen some. There was case number 17, the case of the missing method, where Mike, a junior Ruby dev at the time, was betrayed by his best friend Jenny when they were competing for a coveted internship spot at the world-famous Ruby Institute of Professionals. You know, the organization whose whole reason for existing is to see to it that the Ruby language and community stays alive and kicking forever. I don't know why they never changed their logo. Anyway, Jenny gave Mike dodgy interview prep notes, which incorrectly explained how Ruby method lookup worked, denying the existence of singleton classes. I eventually cracked the case and found the answer. But Mike lost a best friend. And then there was case number 48, the case of the vanished variable, where none other than Jenny got in touch, asking for my help. How the tables had turned because her colleague, Alex, tried to sabotage her team in an RIP Startup Incubator competition final, where there was $500,000 up for grabs, by confusing everyone with class variables and class instance variables, knowing that people often didn't understand the differences in how they worked. Do you all know the differences? Are you sure? Anyway, Alex intentionally introduced a bug to his team's code so his girlfriend, who was on the other team, could win. Aye. I've seen a lot of Ruby drama over the years, and that's only 2 cases. So you can imagine what else I've seen. Just recounting those stories was tiring. And so I've decided that today will be the final debug story I'm going to share. Case number 410. The case that led to my retirement from the Ruby private investigating field. This is the case of the peculiar pattern. Chapter 1. It's the last day of the month, and I decide to get an early night. The next day was a big day. Apple were featuring me and the story graph for their annual Black History Month campaign, and we were going to be front page of the App Store worldwide, leading to a surge in traffic. I'd also finally beta launched a new special feature, reading circles, where people were automatically placed into groups with readers with similar interests. They could buddy read books, share recommendations, keep each other accountable with their reading goals, and more. The Apple feature was going to be a great way to showcase the innovative work we were doing. Everything seemed to be running smoothly by the time I'd gone to bed, and all of a sudden, I'm woken up by my phone ringing. It's Rob. Reading circles aren't working. A big book influencer posted about it, and we're getting so many complaints. People are being added to the wrong groups, their recommendations are off, and the public directory is empty, even though I can see a bunch of groups have been created. I wouldn't have woken you up, but I know you won't want this broken when the Apple feature goes live. I look at the clock. It's 2 a.m. I also notice I have a message on my phone from Jenny. Long shot, but any chance you're around for an emergency RIP case? Oh, hell no. Not now. I've got my own emergency case to deal with. I head out of bed and head down to my desk. Chapter 2. Now, let me talk you through what the code looked like that night. It'd be too difficult for me to show you the code as it was, so I'm only going to show you a simplified version which extracts the key parts. So here we have a simplified version of the Reading Circle class. We define a new class called Reading Circle. This class will manage groups and their members within a Reading Circle community. We then define a class method called groups. And we define a class instance variable groups to store our groups. We use a conditional assignment operator to initialize groups only if it hasn't been set already. And we store the groups in a hash structure. It was beta. I wanted something quick that worked well. And if a certain group doesn't already exist, we just return an empty array. Then we define another class method, addMember, that takes a group name and a user. We access the group's hash using the group name as a key and append the user to the array corresponding to that group. And then we print out a helpful message. We define another class method called publicly listable to determine if a group should be listed in the app-wide public directory. We attempt to retrieve the members of the specified group key, returning an empty array if the group doesn't exist. We then start a case statement to perform pattern matching on the members array. Now, the real-life scenario was a lot more complex than this, but I've simplified it here to just check for at least 2 members. So that's either an array with exactly 2 elements or an array with at least 3 elements, with the underscores acting as a wildcard and matching any value. If the pattern is matched, the publicly listable method returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. As a debugging starting point, I decided to head to the terminal. I started an IRB session and loaded in the class. And then I added in a couple members, Alice and Charlie, to a group called Fantasy. I checked that there are indeed 2 members in the group as expected, the minimum criteria for a group showing up in the public directory. And then I called publicly listable, and it returns false. But the fantasy group matches the true branch in the pattern matching case statement. The method should return true, not false. What a mystery. Now, I'm not proud to admit it, but I was feeling lazy that day, or that night, I should say. I hadn't slept enough. It was 2:12 in the morning. Normally, I'd only reach out to this person when I'd already cracked the case and needed more context. But this was an emergency. So I pick up the phone and call Ellen. She was 47, an experienced freelance developer who'd seen many things. She regularly brought what she'd learned on her adventures to the Ruby codebase. She'd helped me to understand aspects of Ruby internals many a time, and now it was time to get her expert eye in advance. So I give her a call, and it rings once before it's cut off. I go to text her, but see that she herself is typing. I'm sorry, can't talk right now, family emergency. I look at the clock, 2:15. Not a lot of time before the feature goes live. I have a think. It's late, I'm tired, and time is of the essence. I need to be strategic here. So I decide that while I continue to debug myself, I'm going to go to a forum. What's the worst that could happen? I doubt it, but in my tired and distracted state, maybe somebody can get to the bottom of this bug before I do. After checking that there wasn't an existing similar question, I post my own, listing out the issue in its basic form. I get up to make some coffee, and when I return to my desk and do a page refresh, I see I've already got one response. The shadows hold the patterns, but only one shadow is moving. I roll my eyes. I do not have time for nice one right now. They're always cropping up randomly, posting cryptic messages, and never actually helping. Having gotten excited, thinking someone had already come along to solve my problem, and seeing it was nice one up to their antics yet again, now I'm frustrated. So I decide to call their bluff for once. If you actually know what's up, let's pair right now. Okay then. This is wild. I'm shocked. Nice one, as I'm sure many of you know, is an enigma. To my knowledge, they've never paired with anybody before. Nobody even knows what they look like, what they sound like. At this point, I'm just excited to meet the person behind the handle and hopefully crack this bug. Chapter 3. Nice one takes a while to get ready. When they are, they send me a random video conferencing link and say there'll be no video, only voice. Oh, and I'll share my screen and be the one doing all of the driving. They'll only be there to point me in the right direction. It's even later, and I'm even more tired and concerned about running out of time. So I'm not sure I'm going to have the patience for Nice One's cryptic clues, but it's the best I've got right now. I join the call and say hello. I hear some faint background noise, but nothing else. Then, a voice comes out of my computer. What do you know so far? Okay then, no pleasantries. I guess we're getting straight into it. Fine with me. I say, well, I know the pattern matching isn't working. How would you verify that? I guess I extract it, extract the pattern, isolate the problem. So I share my screen and head back into IRB. I load in this publicly listable method, which takes a collection of groups and a specific group key, and then returns true or false based on the same pattern as in my reading circle class. And then I set up a groups hash that mimicked what I had from my experimentation earlier, and then call publicly listable on the groups. And it returns true for both, as expected. So it can't be the pattern then, because in isolation, the matching is returning what I'd expect. The bug must be somewhere else. the starting pattern? Is that your production pattern? What on earth is Nice One on about? Why do they speak in riddles? And then it hit me. What was my starting pattern or my starting point during my debugging? I had this, but do I start with that in production? I SSH into my production server and take a look at what readingcircle.groups returns. And it returns an empty hash. But before I'd gone to bed, I'd seen that people had been posting about their groups. I go back to one of my old local terminal windows and try the same method there. And again, it returns an empty hash, even though I can see above that the fantasy group has 2 members in it. So I wasn't even starting from the correct place during my debugging efforts. Why was readingcircle.groups empty? Nice One, who I'd momentarily forgotten was there, chimes in again. As I said, the shadows hold the patterns, but only one shadow is moving. What on earth are they on about? I ask if they can be a little less cryptic, and when I hear nothing on the other end, I decide to try and dig in myself a little more. The shadows hold the patterns. What contains patterns in my code? Well, the publicly listable method. But only one method is moving? That doesn't really make sense. The code isn't changing. Why shadows? What creates a shadow? Anything can. Anything, any object. Wait a sec. If a shadow is moving, then the object that's creating it is moving. So one shadow is moving means only one object is moving? Then I remembered something I'd learned about during case 17, missing method. I'd learned about object space from a guy at a co-working space who told me that it was a way to interact with all of the live objects within a Ruby session. It had helped me to discover singleton classes back then when I noticed that 2 new objects were being created in a Ruby session every time a single new class was instantiated. One other method the guy had told me about during my investigation was object ID. It returns an integer ID for an object, and the same number will be returned on every single call of object ID for that object. And no 2 active objects within a session will share an ID. I decided to see what it returned for my different groups within a session. I head to an old terminal window where I already had a couple of groups set up and require object space before calling object ID on each of the groups. And the same ID was returned. So the different groups were the same object. But why and how? Then I hear Nice One's voice again. You've solved it. But remember, the each method takes a block. Huh? Yeah, I know the each method takes a block. We must choose between purity and pragmatism. Huh? Time for lunch, Nice One says. And then they're gone. I look to the clock and sigh. It's time to properly wrap up this bug. Chapter 4. So I know a few things right now. The different groups all have the same object ID. But readingcircle.groups returns an empty hash when it should be returning the groups and their members. If not from the groups method, readingcircle has to be accessing these groups somewhere to be able to print the group members. There was another method I discovered during my play with object space, reachable objects from, which showed you all methods a given object had a reference to. Perhaps I could figure out where the groups were living. So I head to a terminal window and call the method on a fantasy group I set up, and it returns what I'd expect, an array with the items Alice and Charlie. And I start to feel like I'm really onto something when the phone rings. It's Jenny. And now I remember her text from earlier. I'm really sorry to bother you, but it's an emergency. And before I can cut her off, she starts talking. She explains how the RIP grant program has a feature launching for Black History Month that day. And there's an issue with this new accountability groups feature that's going live. Everyone is in the wrong group. Well, it looks like everyone is in all of the groups, actually. And hang on a minute, I say, interrupting her. This sounds very similar to the problem I'm having. Send me your code. Of course, Jenny wastes no time at all to do so, and I open it up immediately. I'm quickly skimming through, and it looks nothing like mine, except for one part. When Jenny initializes an accountability group, she also uses the conditional assignment operator to create a new hash with a default empty array if the class instance variable hasn't already been instantiated. Exactly like I do in the reading circle code. I head back to my terminal to try something else with reachable objects from. I set up a variable x to be equal to hash.new, where the hash returns an empty array if a key doesn't exist. And then I check the reachable objects, the hash, and also the default empty array. I add the name Aaron to a new key fantasy. And then I check which objects are reachable from X, and as I suspected, what I assumed to still be the default array has been changed to contain Aaron, and X returns an empty hash. Because when I tried to access the fantasy key on X, the key didn't exist. So the default array was returned and mutated. The default array was the one object that was changing every time. It was the one shadow that was moving. A nice one tried to tell me straight away that pattern matching wasn't the problem. Just to be doubly sure, I go and test out object ID on a key that I know doesn't exist, and so will return the default array. And lo and behold, it's the same ID. What an interesting Ruby quirk. Drew, is Drew in the room? Do you get cash for submitting questions to Who Wants to Be a Ruby Engineer? I'll talk to you afterwards, we'll talk afterwards. Okay, right, back to the story. It's 4:17 a.m. in the morning. I have to hurry and fix the code. But how do I fix this? The fact that there's only one array that's being passed around and overwritten implies that the initialization is only ever executed once. But I need it to be executed multiple times. Each time there's a new key. The each method is an enumerable, taking a block and executing each time for every item in a list. But how can I use this info? And then Nice One's words came back to me. They are always one to be cryptic, and I think I had just solved another of their riddles. They had said, each method takes a block. But did they mean to tell me every method takes a block? Does hash.new take a block? I decide to try. I head to my terminal and type in hash.new, passing a block that puts hi if a key doesn't exist. And it doesn't blow up. It works. Okay, so what do I need? I need that each time there's a new key, I need for a new default empty array to be created, not for one single one to be universally used. So I try something like taking the hash h and say for each key, give me a new array. I adjust my code and then load it into an IRB session to test it out. Now, reading circle.groups is no longer empty. And publicly listable is returning true. Case closed. Thank you. It was really hard. So by the time I'm done fixing my bug and Jenny's, ensuring that there are proper tests, I've only got about an hour before I'm due to wake up. I'm wrapping up the final bits and pieces when the phone rings. It's Ellen. She's got a moment checking in, and after establishing that her family situation is under control, I give her a quick rundown of the bug and the discovery of the hash's empty array default value causing all of the problems. Why does Ruby behave this way? I ask. She explains that it's a side effect of the fact that in Ruby, all data structures are passed by reference. A data structure is a way of storing and organizing data, like arrays, hashes, and so on. In Ruby, when you assign an object to a variable or pass it as an argument to a method, you're always creating a reference to the original object, never creating a new copy of that object. So when you set the default value of the hash to an empty array, you're not saying return a new array each time. You're passing a reference to one particular array and saying use this. The alternative would be passing by value, which means that when you assign an object to a variable or pass it to a method, a new copy of that object is created. Each variable or method argument gets its own copy of that object, so changes to one don't affect the others. Ruby chose pass by reference for objects because it's more efficient. Creating copies of complex data structures every time would consume a lot of memory and processing power. Passing references allows Ruby to be more performant and flexible. But there's a trade-off, as you've seen. Ruby devs have to manage object references carefully to avoid unintended shared state. Ellen is so wise, right? I'm sure many of you have had the pleasure of speaking with her. Don't you find that she always makes things so much clearer? She always makes them make sense. She always shows up conveniently at the exact moment I need her. I thank her for her time once again. We say our goodbyes, and I wrap up the final bits and pieces before going to get a few hours of sleep, hoping that everything runs smoothly tomorrow. Chapter 5. It's 1 month later, and StoryGraph is going from strength to strength after the Apple feature went live. Traffic surged, and the Reading Circles feature was a big hit, officially launching just a few weeks later. But now I'm struggling to juggle StoryGraph work and Ruby private investigating. I want to give it up, but I can't let it go. One afternoon, I'm reading an old issue of the RIP Alive newsletter when I see an advert for a special guest lecture that's happening that very day. In fact, it had already started. But the guest lecturer was none other than Mats. I immediately hurry over and turn up just in time to catch the last 10 minutes. Mats had been talking about mutable strings in Ruby, and he's going through his final points when he says something that stops me in my tracks. Sometimes in Ruby, we must choose between purity and pragmatism. Where had I heard that before? We must choose between purity and pragmatism. Nice one. They had disappeared quickly afterwards, saying, "Time for lunch." And I remember having the fleeting thought that I didn't know where in the world they were, but it was very likely different to me because it had been just before 4 a.m. where I was. 3:48 a.m. to be exact. I pull out my phone and do a quick Google search for what the time would have been in Japan. 12:48. Definitely an appropriate lunchtime. Oh my gosh. Nice one was Mats. Chapter 6. I run after Mats and corner him as he's leaving the building. It was you all along. You're nice one. You've been anonymously helping developers all of this time. But why? He sighs softly, a small smile forming on his face. As a language creator, I needed to understand how developers use Ruby and what challenges they face, he said. But if I just directly helped them, they might not learn to explore and discover solutions on their own. So you chose to help from the shadows. Yes, he said. I wanted to guide, not give all of the answers. Encouraging developers to think deeply is important. And besides, a language creator should care about their community, should want them to succeed. I want everyone to succeed. I've been watching you from afar, Nadia, or should I say Dee, always hoping you'd overcome each challenge and grow stronger because of them. And I can see that you have. I am taken aback by Mats's words. I don't know what to say. I'm about to ask some more questions, but then Mats glances at his watch and says, I have to go. But please, don't tell anyone that I'm nice one. I'd rather keep it between us. Oh my gosh. Mats, I am so sorry. No, Mats, please come back. Mats, I wasn't thinking. Please, I wasn't thinking. Come back. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking.
Well, I was surprised that my secret identity was revealed today. But I realized it's time to stop hiding. As I said in my opening keynote, Ruby was created to make programmers happy and to bring joy into coding. Let's continue to help one another, because only then can we keep the heart of Ruby and this wonderful community alive. I love you all, and I am proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for being so gracious with my slip-up. Wow, what an adventure this has been. You know, it just hit me. It was in his name all along. Mats is nice one. Mats is nice. Our community is better when we all try to be like Mats. We should all strive to be as nice and helpful as he is, to lift each other up. Because only when we do that can we truly embody the spirit of Ruby. It's not just about the code we write, but the connections we make and the support that we offer. Let's keep that spirit alive. Let's keep choosing to be open, welcoming, giving, and kind. It's what sets the Ruby community apart. It makes us special. So I have a challenge to each of you. Go and be the nice one in someone else's story. Maybe not as cryptic as nice one, but offer help without expecting anything in return. Be generous with your time. Be patient. Mentor someone who is just starting out. Collaborate on open source projects. Learn about how Ruby really works and contribute to the language. Whatever you can do, whenever you can do it, no matter how small. Every little bit helps. And when you're in doubt and not sure what to do, just remember that Mats is nice, so we are nice. Oh, I like that. I think I'm onto something. Thank you.